Mary, would you like to begin?
Good evening. I welcome you to this evening's Stormwater webinar, sponsored by the Village Preservation and Improvement Society. I am Mary Chaves, the current Vice President of the Village Society. As many of you know, stormwater is rain that doesn't soak into the land, but runs off buildings, parking lots, streets, and other impervious surfaces into gutters and storm drains, leading to our stormwater drainage system. This in turn feeds into the area's streams and rivers that run into the Potomac River and on to the Chesapeake Bay. Recent climate change has increased the intensity of storms and has resulted in flooding in several areas of the city. The expansion of impervious surfaces in response to economic development, reduced green space and tree coverage, and new mega homes may also contribute to current stormwater problems. Polluted stormwater runoff is the main source of pollution in our streams and rivers, which also serve as the source of our drinking water. Our current drainage infrastructure is also very old, often insufficient to handle heavy rains, and in need of repair or replacement. Our panelists this evening will address these issues and explain what the city is doing and can do to address them, and the potential financial costs for the city. Our first panelist is Tony Dudley, the city's stormwater project manager. Our second panelist is Dave Gustafson, a member of the city's stormwater task force and former chairman of that group, which is charged with focusing on priority projects for stormwater improvements and recommendations on stormwater fees and the creation of a standing commission on these issues. Our final panelist is Jeff Peterson, president of the Village Society and in charge of the Society's Rain Smart and Rain Barrel programs. Keith Thurston joins me in monitoring any questions that you may submit, and we'll raise these during our Q&A session. Just click on the button of Q&A at the bottom of your screen and type in your question, and if appropriate, who you would like to respond. Thank you all for joining us. I turn now to Tony Dudley. He is the project manager for the City of Falls Church, the Department of Public Works, responsible for managing the city's stormwater projects and programs. Tony has over 25 years experience as a hydrologist and as manager of stormwater projects, and has helped government organizations at the local, state, and federal level, as well as internationally. As part of his government experience, he has helped in establishing and building neighborhood stormwater projects that have had a real impact on decreasing flooding and erosion and improved deteriorating stormwater infrastructure. Tony, I turn it over to you. There should be a mute button on the left-hand corner.
Thank you. I'm sorry. New system. I haven't done many Zooms.
Okay.
I'm a Teams guy, so I apologize for that. Really, I'm sorry. Again, well, as I was saying, I'd like to thank the VPIS for having me on. As many of you know, I'm pretty new to the city, but I've started to learn a lot about the city, and I'm sure there's lots more. But what I want to talk about tonight is just a little bit of history, and really the main goal is to talk about our 6 priority projects, along with our some of our water quality projects. As you guys know, Falls Church has been busy since its inception. The place was run over by a civil war. it developed pretty early in life. You know, in the 1800s, it was a bustling area, and it's continued to be that way. This is Falls Church in 1937. You can see the development, the heavy urban development that occurred, and we've come to have to deal with that in this time that we're in now. This is just a short diagram of the city along with the map of Falls Church. Excuse me, the map of Falls Church along with the city boundary. It's that purple line there in the middle, divides 4 mile from Tripp's Run. Those are, you see in the black, are pipes. You can see we have a lot of pipes. Excuse me. We have a lot of pipes in the city, and only a few channels. We had historic floods in the past, and this got people moving in the 50s to improve the storm drainage. So the response pretty much to that was to put in a lot of underground piping. You know, as far as stormwater, we can pat ourselves on the backs that we didn't follow communities like Alexandria or Washington, DC with combined sewer. As old as the city is, it would not have surprised anyone if that would have been the case, but they didn't. It was a separate sewer system, or at least it over time developed into a separate stormwater sewer system. So this is what we did back from 56 to 80. And you see the type of pipe that we have there. That's what they call corrugated metal pipe. It was very popular in this time frame to put in. It was cheap to manufacture, to deliver, and to install. But the problems that we garner from that is this. You can see we have a lot of corrugated metal pipe that has the bottom eaten out of, as the picture on the left shows. We have maintenance issues that we have to deal with, as the picture on the right shows. And then in 2019, flooding reared its ugly head. Although the storm that came through in July of 2019 was registered around to be, for the length of the storm that happened, about a 200-year storm event. But what the event did do, so to say that it was very unlikely that we would have any kind of stormwater infrastructure that could handle that type of storm event. But it did bring awareness to the stormwater infrastructure again, once again. It led to the creation of a stormwater task force, which I'm going to let Dave talk about after me. And it also led to the development of 6 priority projects around town, as well as the development of some green infrastructure projects. And so I'm going to take some time to talk about each one of those projects. And I won't bore you with all of the nitty gritty, but just kind of give you an awareness of what the problem was, and then a very quick review of how we may solve it and the schedule. So first up is West Columbia Trammell Branch. This is a project we've had going for some time. We just finished installing some pipe across the W&OD canal, railroad bed or trail. And we are going to finish that up with another phase that takes that flow. Can you guys see my mouse?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we're going to take, we replaced the pipe coming across here already. We just finished that work last Friday. In about, say, June of 2022, we're going to complete the rest of the project that ties into the bridge down here at Little Falls Road. You can see the problem that we had was just flooding being backed up from the the trail there. And what we're going to do is put in a bigger pipe and also separate the flow from the existing pipe, which you see here in blue, from one another. So that we're looking to go into construction on that in July of 2022 at a cost of about $2 million. Next up is Hillwood Avenue. We call it number 1. It's been called Hillwood Avenue West before, but no matter what you call it, the problem is we've had flooding down around there for less than the 10-year storm event, which all stormwater infrastructure in the city should be designed to at least a 10-year storm event. That means keeping the flow of water below the ground surface, as well as something called its hydraulic grade line, which essentially is, in layman's terms, the amount of pressure needed to keep the flow in the pipe. So all of that has to be below ground. And we plan on solving this problem by, again, increasing the pipe size of a pipe that is in poor need of replacement. It's corrugated metal. It has quite a few trees and things growing on top of it that have deformed it the entire way. It's kind of like almost like a squished pancake almost. And really has taken up a lot of the capacity that the pipe had. So we're going to have to replace that mainly, and that's the biggest part, with some downstream channel improvements. We're looking at a completion date of December of 2022 on that particular project at a cost of about, again, $2 million. And I'm sorry, I misspelled wood. I apologize for that. I'll correct that in the slideshow. Next up is Lincoln Avenue. Lincoln Avenue, this is up at the top of Lincoln Avenue, very, very top of Lincoln Avenue, the most northwestern point. And we've got quite a few places where, again, the street drainage does not meet the design storm event. So we have to repair that by increasing some pipe, as well as also adding a couple of inlets in certain places. We're trying to avoid that water getting up and then over into those yards and then down into basements that occur in the houses that have the pink dots on them. We should be able to do that. And that's not going to be a tough project. It's all in the right of way. We're looking at a completion date on that of September of 2022. Okay, I'm sorry, the cost on that is about $830,000. Next up is Hillwood Avenue 2. This is the most eastern project on Hillwood Avenue. It really involves three homes there on Hillwood Avenue that have where the lots are kind of sunken in there. And again, we want to try to pass the 10-year storm event through that area as much as possible. And that's going to mean redirecting some of these pipes and abandoning others in order to really just, it's a hodgepodge of stormwater in there now. And we're just trying to organize it a bit more with some better pipes. $350,000 is what we expect this to cost, and a completion date of December 2022. East Columbia Street and Harrison Branch. This is going to be an interesting project. We don't plan on starting or finishing the final design until January of 2023. But we do have quite a few problems in the areas, undersized drainage, mainly there on Columbia and on Jefferson, where it has been flooding some finished floor areas. And we want to kind of try to reduce that as much as possible. So that means, again, we're working with corrugated metal in this area. And so that would mean a possible total replacement of that pipe through the reach right through here. About $750,000 for that project. And we'll see how the property owners want to handle the issues that they have. Next is Sherrill Avenue and Trips Run. This is kind of a little different of project. This involves a lot of street flooding down in this area for greater than the 10-year storm and enough water to get into people's cars, essentially. We are looking at that project as a completion date of February 2024. We estimate 1.2 million. That mainly has to deal with some of the replacement of the road itself. There are some other options that we're looking at. The conceptual design was completed, but I think we have a few more options that we really want to check out. Our final design on that is not going to be complete until January 2023 on that particular project. So those are what I call the 6 priority projects. And we are working on them feverishly, excuse my fat tongue here. But there were also 4 other projects that the task force brought up, and those were the City Hall campus green infrastructure project, which after a little bit of investigation and everything, we know that we have a storm filter system that is currently in place down there, as well as a large underground detention system. So what we feel like we need to add is a rain garden or 2 up in the park area to reduce the amount of soil that runs off into the parking lot and then down into the storm filter system. And we plan on doing that next year in FY23. And then last but not least is the greening of Lincoln Avenue. I apologize for the jumbo there. I think I got something in the way, but this project is really moving, can really move along if we are able to get a transportation alternatives grant that we just applied for, like yesterday. We just finished the application. It includes planting trees along Lincoln Avenue from the city limits all the way up to West and the intersection of West and Lincoln. Just to give you a kind of a perspective on what it would look like, you see you have some tree planters kind of over on the sides there, as well as a median strip that would run from the city limits all the way up to Great Falls, because that's where we have the most room to do that. We'd also be looking at putting in crosswalks, the high-vis crosswalks across at several locations across the road. And from a stormwater standpoint, we would look to utilize things such as sidewalk rain gardens to help drain some of the water off the street. That would help also alleviate some of the flooding that we have in the area, as well as underground detentions at least 2 locations, maybe 3, to help reduce the amount of discharge downstream into areas like the pipe on the WNOD canal, which would then also go to help Trammell Branch out. If that project is approved, it would be a FY23, FY24 project. And with that, I have reached the end of my, I think I came in right at 25 minutes. I apologize. So yes, that's the end of my my portion here, and I'd like to turn it back over to Mary.
Thank you very much, Tony. Our next speaker is going to be Dave Gustafson. He's a member and former chair of the city's Stormwater Task Force that was created after the July 2019 floods. He collaborates with task force members, victims of repeated flooding and sewage backups, and city leaders to improve flood resiliency and water quality in the city's neighborhoods and watersheds. Dave is especially interested in redevelopment issues, preserving trees, and adding green infrastructure. He also runs the Little City Waterproofers listserv for homeowners to share floodproofing tips and severe weather alerts. Dave has been a Falls Church resident for nearly 10 years, currently chairs the Citizens Advisory Committee on Transportation. Dave, I turn it to you.
Thank you very much, Mary. I also see that we have one hand up from an attendee. Do you want to, that's probably for Tony and not me. Do you want to take that now or later? I'm fine either way.
What we would encourage the audience to do is to click on the Q&A at the bottom of the screen and to write in your questions for now. We'll have open Q&A session after all of the panel presentations. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Mary. And thank you, Mary and Jeff and all the folks from VPIS for putting this panel together. It's a very important issue in Falls Church, and it's a very timely issue. We're under a flash flood watch right this minute. We were under more than 30 flood watches and warnings in 2020, and early July is always a kind of a scary time for anyone who's in a low-lying area that has any sort of flooding or sanitary sewer backup concerns. Just a tiny bit about me. I was a reporter for a long time. I covered a lot of flooding issues in Appalachia in the South. I've covered hurricane aftermath, something I thought about at large scale levels, but in recent years after the July 2019 flood, it's something I've started to pay much more attention to. And the more that I've talked to folks in other low-lying areas of the city, the more it became apparent that we all needed. It was July 2019 was a big wake-up call for city leaders and city residents that we needed to do more to tackle the flooding and the sanitary sewer issues that we have in the city. We're a fairly small city in terms of geographic size, but our population is up more than 40% in the last 20 years. New census numbers are come out soon. I'm sure it's going to be even higher than that. There's an ongoing appetite for redevelopment, both residential and commercial. That's a double-edged sword. I know in older neighborhoods like mine, there are some issues with runoff and as they call it, illicit connections of downspouts and drains to sanitary sewers. So there are a lot of issues that can be resolved. When there's a little bit under there. That can be resolved in redevelopment, but there's also issues involved with tearing down mature trees and excess runoff when the slope of the property is changed with a new structure on it. So just a couple of things I wanted to touch on. A lot of with the storm, so a lot of credit goes to council for quick action and city staff, Department of Public Works for quick action after the 2019 storm. There was a flurry of activity. They held a great town hall meeting. I encourage you, if you're new to the city, to go back and watch that. If you Keith, if you get a chance, if you could pull up the 2019, I'm sorry, the 2020 task force report, and then go to page 9 of 40. It's page 6 of the PDF. Oh, let's see. It's the other tab. Sorry. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, if you could go to page 9 of 40 there, please. So for anyone who really wants to get into the details about stormwater and sanitary issues, I'd encourage you to look at the Stormwater Task Force's page on the city's website. Go up to page 9, please. 9 of 40. There you go. So that it shows the heat map that the city produced of the solid waste pickups from the July 2019 flood. So you'll see hotspots along Trips Run, along Lincoln Avenue, Trammell Branch, a lot of the places, Hillwood, a lot of the places we talked that Tony talked about earlier. So this is sort of what led to the creation of the 6 priority projects. The Stormwater Task Force then worked on those last year to prioritize those, add a lot of other recommendations for City Council to adopt in the near term and the short term. City Council had the Stormwater Task Force back for a second round this year. Everything was done virtually, obviously, and Council had asked us to take more of a look at green infrastructure recommendations, and also recommendations for how to structure a standing board, not just an ad hoc committee, to look at stormwater issues going forward, because as we know with the flood watch tonight, these issues are not going away. Climate change is only making the issues more of a challenge more often, and our increasing population and our aging infrastructure are certainly adding to the challenge. But much to Council's credit, to DPW's credit, last year Council approved $400,000 to continue engineering on the 6 priority projects. They approved funding for 2 stormwater engineers, the first of whom is Tony, and we're very lucky to have him on board. They're going to be bringing on another project manager as well. And so what I've been doing, what the task force has been doing, we're trying to encourage City Council, city leaders, citizens to make sure that Public Works and everyone who in the city have enough people in place, funding in place to tackle some of these issues, because there are some parts of the city that are not that are susceptible to flooding with a 2-year storm. And we've learned that I'm still learning quite a bit about stormwater and sanitary issues and water quality issues. So there's so much to learn. That I've learned a lot from Tony and his predecessors in DPW. And but it's clear that we have to take stormwater seriously, and so I'm very grateful to VPIS for putting this discussion together. One of the other things that with our focus on green infrastructure is making sure that we can sort of capture and treat as much stormwater high in the watershed, so that it's not just rolling downhill at high velocity and affecting folks who are lower in the watershed. So it's going to improve our water quality obligations for the Chesapeake Bay. It creates a healthier environment for us all to live in. And it's going to make things more manageable when we have these major storms. And one thing that we have going for, or we have a few things going for us. We've got a very dedicated staff. Robert Goff and his crew have do a tremendous job of clearing the waterways every year, multiple times. Clearing out literally tons and tons of debris to keep the pipes flowing as much as possible. But we have to remain vigilant. After every major storm, I know I and other people walk along the waterways to see if that has dislodged any trees that are creating a damming issue. So it's something that we need to keep an eye on with each storm, because the landscape can change overnight if a tree becomes dislodged by high waters and creates a backup behind it. Or creates damming of the bridge. And let me see what else I have here. And yeah, as Tony put it, I've come to realize that there is quite a bit of a hodgepodge approach to stormwater that has happened over the years due to landowners' rights and being able to, kind of do what they want on in a lot of places. There's building that has happened right up to the creek. In many places, there are places that are intermittent creeks that building has happened over those areas. So someone will put up a wall around their patio in a place that becomes a creek when it rains really hard, and then that creates a dam, and then that leads to backups in nearby structures. And but as Tony put it earlier, something that the task force has encouraged is to create sort of a baseline level of service that that city residents can expect, and we think that at the very least that should be keeping safe from having any sort of interior flooding during a 10-year storm event, and being free from sanitary sewer backup issues. Those are public health hazard. On my street, there were a couple of folks who were exposed to raw sewage in 2019 who developed staph infections that were very serious. So these are serious matters, and there's also the public health or the public safety issue in terms of having folks be able to having emergency responders be able to get around the city during these storm events. If the water's not in the right places, then and streets are flooded, then we know there are parts of the city that have been trapped from having emergency access during some of these storm events. So that is, and just one real quick tip, if anyone's interested in the Little City Waterproofers listserv, let me know. If you're interested in lowering your stormwater fee as a resident, I encourage you to Google Falls Church stormwater utility fee. There are a lot of ways that you can do projects, small and large, around your property that will help your neighbors and help lower your fee. And VPIS is a fantastic partner in that. I've taken advantage of some of their stormwater, the rain barrel programs, and the and tree plantings as well. So I appreciate everything that VPIS has done. So I'll turn back over to you, Mary. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate your comments. Our next panelist is Jeff Peterson. He is retired from the Environmental Protection Agency, where he worked on clean water for almost 40 years. He also worked for the U.S. Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works and the White House Council on Environmental Quality. He has managed the VPIS RainSmart program for 4 years and is currently president of the Village Society. Jeff, I turn it to you.
Great, thank you, Mary. I'm going to share screen here. Bring this up. Is that coming through for everybody? Great. So I'm Jeff Peterson, and I want to take a few minutes to tell everybody about the RainSmart program and the contribution that it's making to helping manage stormwater in the city. Of course, the Village Preservation Improvement Society is interested in lots of aspects of the local environment. We support the neighborhood tree program and commemorative gardens around the city. We advocate for improved environmental policies and goals and programs. We're particularly recently getting more engaged on some of the climate change related challenges, both reducing greenhouse gases and adapting to climate change. We support the Operation Earthwatch program at the schools that helps kids get a better understanding of local environmental issues. And we work on stormwater, and mostly that's through the RainSmart program, which I'll be talking about. So clearly the stormwater issues that we face have different components and characteristics. A couple have been described already. Obviously, the flooding damages homes. It's a nuisance, it's a frustration it's costly, and it generates real psychological harm for people who feel like they're not really safe and secure in their homes. I personally know of people who have literally moved out of the city because of the flooding issues. But it also generates reductions in the water quality of our local streams, and the high velocity, particularly water coming into the streams during the storm, will really damage our local streams, generate lots of sedimentation, which is rushed down the streams into neighboring jurisdictions, passing our problem along downstream all the way to the Chesapeake Bay. Here's a picture from the city's website. It's like something you saw just a few minutes ago. This particular map is interesting because it clearly shows the watersheds of Trips Run and 4 Mile Run. But if you look there, you see the dotted lines are buried streams, as opposed to the solid lines that are streams still on the surface of the ground. So you can see there are a lot of streams in the city that were covered over to provide for more space for development. And so many of these streams now are not fully functioning, and they generate higher flow to the surface streams. Here's a slightly different look at the streams in Falls Church, kind of a more of a maybe a graphic perspective that shows a little more of the hills and valleys and how the streams work within them. And it shows really, if we hadn't covered over all the streams, the many kind of waterways that we would have around town that have just disappeared. So as we look forward, going ahead in Falls Church, we have two key ideas to consider as we think about stormwater. One is that the city's developing rapidly. 45% of the current surface area of the city is now impervious, so that water is running off the impervious surface into storm drains. And the population is growing quite rapidly. The population is expected to be around 20,000 in 2045 compared to 2015 when it was just 13,000. So at a time when we're developing rapidly, we're also facing climate change effects, more extreme storm events, more rainfall, so that we can literally expect flooding to be worse and more challenging as a result of both of these factors. Here's a photo that just is a recent flooding event down on Broad Street. It gives you a sense of the scale of the problem. And the RainSmart program really is one small part of a much bigger city effort to deal with stormwater. Tony gave a great summary of the work the city's doing to deal with the much needed restoration of the underground pipes in the city. The RainSmart program has a slightly different goal. It's intended to help rainwater soak into the ground on site and to help prevent flooding and protect the quality of local streams and in the wider Chesapeake Bay watershed. So rather than move water into conveyances and pipes and then down through the stream network to downstream jurisdictions, we'd like to see as much of the rainfall that falls in Falls Church to stay in Falls Church and soak into the ground and replenish the groundwater rather than run off on the surface. So the RainSmart program is really modeled after the very similar program in Arlington County called Stormwater Wise. It's been in operation since 2018, and we're very pleased to have the support of the city, including some financial support for this effort through a memorandum of understanding with the city. So there are three key elements of the RainSmart program. One is stormwater education and information. The second is grants for rain barrels, some of which you see here, mostly installed at residential properties, and grants for rain gardens, again installed by homeowners. So the stormwater information component of the program is trying to share good information about stormwater with the community. This webinar is one example, but we also do outreach on rain barrels and rain gardens to explain the value that they have. We have a cooperative arrangement with Brown's Hardware where we work together to make rain barrels available to the community at a discounted price. We're very pleased and happy to have Brown's working with us on that. And we're happy that the Falls Church News Press helps us get the word out with ads and other informational articles on stormwater and on the RainSmart program. And we're thankful for that. And we also try and make members of VPIS as informed as possible about stormwater challenges. So the rain barrel part of the program is pretty simple. It's a grant of $50 toward a rain barrel. You can get up to 2 rain barrels. The homeowner purchases and installs the rain barrels themselves. They submit an application to VPIS. We approve the application, and then the homeowner installs the rain barrel, takes a picture, and sends us a photo and the receipt. That's all there is to it. Here are some examples of the rain barrels installed under the RainSmart program. A couple of different examples here of how it's done. Here's a couple more different ways. This one on the left is a double rain barrel, which we heartily applaud. It captures more stormwater flow. And then there's the rain garden aspect of the program, and this is grants for rain gardens, which are part of your landscape designed to soak up rainwater. Also, we have grants for conservation landscapes that are like rain gardens, but not quite so highly engineered. The grants pay up to 50% of the cost of a project, but not more than $1,500 per project. And basically, this is pretty simple too. You submit an application to VPIS. We have a group of people that take a look at it. If it looks good, we send it to the city approves it. Then the homeowner goes ahead and gets the design and the installation done. We do require that you use a certified landscaper that's been trained to do this kind of work. Send us photos from before and after and receipt, and we send you a check for the appropriate amount of money. And so we've had some pretty good experiences. This is an example in the photo of one of the rain gardens installed. Here's a couple more photos of other projects. This one on the left currently was underway at the time, and here's a completed one on the right. So we feel like those are making a small but important contribution. And our goal here really is to maintain the program over a period of time so that year after year we develop more and more rain barrels, more and more conservation landscapes and rain gardens, and as much as possible help rainwater soak into the ground where it falls. Here are some statistics on the program to date. 54 rain barrels at 39 homes and 6 rain garden projects completed. There are others in the pipeline still under development and construction. So finally, just to wrap up, we do see some new opportunities for the program. We'd like to do more with education and outreach. We'd like to consider expanding funding for rain gardens. I think we've learned that Rain gardens are costly. The $1,500 grant helps people move in that direction, but we think we could get more projects if we were to raise that amount, that cap by a little bit. We'd also like to encourage bigger projects, like through projects at churches or businesses and perhaps in parking lots. And we'd like to see the city continue to support rain gardens in parks and schools and on other public land. And finally, we would like to see the city, as Tony mentioned at the close of his presentation, take a hard look at the design of new streets and really do as much as possible to install green infrastructure up front. And just here's an example of the way we can anticipate in the future having greener streets. We've relied for years and years on the old curb and gutter model, in which stormwater coming off our city streets is just channeled directly down to the storm drains and into the streams where it generates high flow and flooding. But we're seeing in many places around the country and in Virginia and Northern Virginia, the expanded use of bioswales, such as on the right, where the rainwater coming off the streets doesn't go straight into the sewer system, but it's filtered through bioswales and rain gardens associated with the streets. So really, there's just a summary page of information on RainSmart and the City of Falls Church program. It's really worth taking a look at the Arlington County Stormwater Wise program. And if you'd like to see a video on local efforts to deal with stormwater, Dave Eckert has done a nice film on raining in the storm, which is available on the VPIS website. And with that, I'll close.
Thank you, Jeff. We appreciate it. That was very interesting. I'm going to just toss in a couple of questions to kick off the Q&A session, and then I'll ask Keith to pick up the questions from the audience. First question, in 2012, the city staff estimated it would take roughly $20 million over the next 10 years to solve drainage problems and replace the aging stormwater infrastructure. We're now approaching the end of that decade, and I see we have 6 major projects that are underway. How far along are we on the replacement of infrastructure that needs it? And I think I would ask Tony this question. And we need to have you unmute again, Tony. Thank you.
I'm sorry, again, I apologize. Yeah, 10 years ago, that was the estimate. And I bet you if we look back far enough, you'll see that there were estimates before that. But the issue was funding. The city was certainly not generating enough out of the general fund to storm these large projects. And then we did create the stormwater utility that was to certainly aid in getting some of these projects done and also aid towards the maintenance. But its first duty was really to answer to the municipal separate sewer system permit that all cities were required to do at that time. So that happened in 2014. And again, it's been a struggle to find that funding. So now with Dave's help and with the task force help, this council is certainly committed to seeing that through. So if you were to ask me how much more is needed, I think there was a number floating around. I mean, these estimates get out to more than 50 years, but I think over 50 years, we were going to need about $69 million to help replace and repair the stormwater drainage. And so we're just we're just hitting the top of the iceberg because there's a lot of, unfortunately, there's a lot of pipe out there that needs to be replaced. Pipe's expensive. There are only a few opportunities to daylight those pipes. So I would say, yeah, we've had a tough time getting funding, and now, we have a city council that is on the move to get it done. And that's kind of what I have to say to that.
Okay, thank you. Just picking up on that, how are the current stormwater fees being used within the city? Are they used primarily for pipes? Are you using them also for green infrastructure? And how adequate are the current fees? That I know is a very sensitive issue for a lot of people, but if you can give us some kind of an estimate of what we're aiming at here, maybe. Yeah, and I don't know if that's something that Dave wants to try his hand at, give from the task force perspective.
Yeah, I'm probably more willing to be opinionated, so it's not my it's not the folks who sign my checks. So what we found in the last 2 years is that, I mean, council did a great job in terms of creating the stormwater utility fee. There was one small increase to keep up with inflation, but the fee largely sort of took funds that were covered by the Department of Public Works general fund, and then just sort of shifted shifted what money was going toward that. So it's dedicated funding for stormwater issues, which is great. But the fact remains, I mean, we have a very aging system that does not carry the 2-year or the 10-year storm in many places. So we have some catching up to do. We have a lot of remediation. There's a lot of very old pipe that's in the system. And we do, the city staff does a great job of maintaining what we have, but we are at risk of some failures as this infrastructure gets older and older, and our population grows and grows, and more tear downs happen. So I mean, what we found with the stormwater task force in the last couple of months was, the stormwater fee is not adequate to keep up with our needs in terms of being able to build new projects. I mean, DPW does a great job of squeezing out what money it can to create some smaller projects here and there. And much credit to council and city staff for including, I think it's about $8.5 million in the next 5 or 6 years of capital improvement projects for the six priority projects. But we're all trying to figure out how much of the federal money might be available for stormwater and sanitary sewer projects. So hopefully, we have some catching up to do in terms of repairing our system and making it work the way it should. And we're trying to take a more holistic view of the system to make sure that, it's not as much of a hodgepodge as Tony put it earlier, that, the upstream, makes sense with what's, in the middle versus what's downstream. And as much as possible that we're not just, putting water in pipes to get it moving as quickly as possible, but we are trying to use green infrastructure at every elevation in the watershed as much as possible. But there are some underserved parts of the city in terms of their basic drainage, and there are a lot of lessons learned from what works and what doesn't work, and every storm's a little bit different, and we go through a lot of user testing, and I know city staff hears about it when there's not when something doesn't work the way that we want it to. And so I know Tony has been out on meeting with residents on Memorial Day. I see Wyatt, the city manager, driving around it 2 a.m. During storms, and so that extra effort is noticed and appreciated. When I was a reporter, I covered a lot of dysfunctional community governments, but we're very fortunate to have a very responsive, very responsible, proactive government and city staff. And it's great when we can kind of pair our citizen perspectives of seeing how these things work and don't work, and pairing that with the engineering expertise that we're bringing on.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to turn it to Keith Thurston now, who's been monitoring the questions from the audience. Keith, will you pick up and start asking some of those questions?
Sure. Some of them are just really quick. One of the questions is the improvement on Lincoln Avenue, the boulevard effect. Did we hear correctly? That's going from the city line, the Arlington line, all the way up to West Street. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Several of the questions have to do with a similar issue, and that's large houses on a small lot. And as we're working on trying to reduce the stormwater and deal with the flooding that we have, at the same time, we're exacerbating the problem by having the larger homes continue to be built and even larger ones built. Has there been any change, number one, in the ratios of coverage, where it used to be 35% total lot coverage and 25% for the house? Is that still the same? And if so, how are some of these larger homes being built?
I believe it is. I don't think there's been any change necessarily in the ordinance. But I can tell you, but what I can tell you is that there are certain thresholds that if met, the property owner or the developer or whomever have to go through a special series of permitting that would include having on-site stormwater management systems. That could include detention, that could include some type of BMPs, a mixture of the two. And so that is really our way now of trying to combat it. There's not a lot. I mean, property owners, there's lots of things that they can, and they have the right to do with their property. And we have guidelines that are set both by the state of Virginia and mainly by the state of Virginia for how that development goes. So yes, we get some bigger houses. And a lot of times there's stormwater controls needed on those houses. And that's something that would not be needed on, say, if a house develops into a house of similar size. And all of that includes patios and the like, decks, patios, all those outdoor features are also included in that square footage. So we're getting a little bit better bang for our buck when large structures like that come in. But when similar size structures come in, there's not a lot we can do. Basements, on the other hand, I would ask, all developers to stop building basements in Falls Church. And there are some changes may be expected in the ordinance. It's too early to tell now, but there are some changes being looked at that would not let a builder build a basement that was below where it was going to get flooded by, say, the 100-year event, if there was a water body close to it. And so that is looked to protect us from future scenarios, and we'll do what we can with the basements that we have. So I hope
Is that inside the current FEMA flood zones or beyond those?
Say that one more time.
would that boundary be within inside the current FEMA flood zones or beyond the FEMA flood zone?
Beyond the FEMA flood zones, beyond the FEMA flood zone. So that would be everywhere. And because there's no reason why houses outside the FEMA regulated FEMA floodplain shouldn't have the same protections as those inside of, just because it's not a mapped area. So I think that's what, I mean, and this might, I hope this doesn't get me in trouble, but that's what I would be pushing for as staff, you know, because it's about time we made that change.
Thank you. So Dave, there's a question here for you about, thank you for the report that person has read the report and they like what they're reading. There's a question, did the task force look at the issue of large houses on small lots and the tree takedown that it causes?
Yes, absolutely. We've been very interested in the issue of redevelopment, both residential and commercial. That's something that if you take a look at the recommendations, we have some. It's a very complex issue because there are some things in terms of what, you know, because of the Dillon rule in Virginia, some of the things that the city can and can't you know, allow. I'm no expert in that, so I would defer to others on that with more expertise in zoning. But I know, you know, across the city there, you know, you see, you know, across the city there are lots that have been clear cut, and they'll put a big basement in, and they'll put in a big house, and then it'll change the flows, you know, to the neighboring properties and affect everybody else downstream. We are seeing some new developments have some of the retention facilities required. I think you'll start to see a lot more on that in the coming months. I know there's some changes in Richmond this year in terms of what is and isn't allowed in terms of tree preservation. I know in my capacity with the Citizens Advisory Committee on Transportation, also with the Stormwater Task Force, I've been in touch with the Environmental Sustainability Council and the Urban Forestry Commission, that we're all interested in the issue of tree preservation, because we know there are other municipalities that have, I've been talking to some neighbors who were recently traveling in Florida, and they said that they were impressed with some of the towns around Tampa and what they've done in terms of working with developers to come up with more flexible regulations that allow for work within, you know, there's a little bit more wiggle room in terms of where you're putting the new structure in, with the idea that you're going to preserve more mature trees. But yeah, by all means, you know, speak up about that. It's a big issue, and I think there's been, you know, you can see bad practices and you can see good practices around the city, and I think we need to do more to highlight both of those and figure out sort of what some of the best practices are in our little city with the limited geography that we have to figure out how we're going to control this water and improve the water quality within the small space that we have, and be good neighbors for our upstream and downstream neighbors as well.
Thank you. Jeff, you were on the original task force that I believe set up the stormwater fees, and the person here has done things to improve their land, putting a swale in and creating storm water detention on the property, and wants to know how to go about getting a reduction in their stormwater fees because of it. Jeff, you want to talk a little about that?
Yeah, so when the stormwater utility and the fee structure was established, it included a credit mechanism for individual property owners that wanted to do constructive things on their own property to apply to the city for a credit against that would reduce the fee that they paid based on the calculation of the impervious surface on their property. So there are a range of different actions that a homeowner can take. I'm not clear enough about the specifics of this individual case to know whether a fee would, a credit would be applied to the fee, but it's certainly worth going on the city's website where they describe the credits and going ahead and talking to the city staff about processing a credit. I think there is more we could do to expand those credits so that they are better used and are more of an incentive to do things, not just rain gardens and rain barrels, but other practices on properties. And that would really be worth looking at.
And Tony, who do they see on the staff if they want to apply for a credit?
They would see, you caught me there, really good.
They can find it on the website.
Yes, yes, it's on the website. And if nothing else, they can contact me and I'll make sure they get to the right place.
Okay, that's great. Tony, one more for you. Frightening the 6 projects that's going on and how they're going to be staged. And the person writes that if they were all done at once, it could create quite a traffic issue around Falls Church. Has that been considered, or are they going to be sequenced in so that they're done at different times?
They actually are done at different times, and they're fairly far apart from one another too. Besides the Lincolns, which are spaced out in a time frame, so that they don't coincide with the other. The rest of them are fairly spaced apart. So, and they involve local streets. Like, for example, Lincoln Avenue up at the top there, very localized street. It's going to disrupt some neighbors there in the area, but probably just held to that area. And the same can be said for, well, Trammell Branch is all in the WNOD right away, so there won't be any traffic problems there. So yeah, they're spread out enough and sequenced enough where you won't run into any problems that way.
Okay, thank you. Then another question. On these projects that we're doing and the impact on Trips Run and 4 Mile Run, does Arlington County, for instance, on 4 Mile Run, have any review and feedback on us increasing the stormwater flow into 4 Mile Run?
The short answer to, well, yes and no. If we actually do some work down in that area, we will, of course, let Arlington County know. But as far as the added flow, I mean, all this flow eventually gets to the floodplain, and which is regulated floodplain, kind of which is where it belongs. So we do coordinate with the guys that we actually get on property, but from a increased flow standpoint, we're generally not taking up a lot of volume in the area, and I don't see us as necessarily increasing flow other than well, not at all really. So, but we can, there's other area, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that, including detention qualities of the system, things like that. So I can't answer that question directly, but of course we do coordinate well, we have to coordinate with a lot of people on these projects.
So another similar question is, some of the larger homes are built that have basements, and the basement is built below the water table. So the sump pump is running 24/7, pumping directly into the storm sewer or the curb. Is that permitted, that people are pumping the water table basically onto the stormwater system?
I can't answer that question for sure. I don't think, I mean, if you got basement water coming in like that, where you're below, you've got some issues with your developer from that standpoint. I don't see how anyone would even warrant or an insurance company would even warranty a house that has that kind of problem. I'm sure there are going to be times where you have some rise in just based on drainage that may or may not get in the that may or may not get in the basement, but there's no rules against sump pumps being put out into the yards as long as they're controlled and not tied in directly with the creek.
So they're not allowed to tie in directly to the stormwater system. They have to go out to the yard somewhere.
That's correct.
So
we wouldn't want to tie into the storm drainage system, and that's been a problem. Some of the houses that we have in Falls Church were built some time ago, and back then, I'll give you a great example. Back then, they were allowed to drain their basements, were allowed to drain their floor drain to a stormwater system, right? Their toilet and their shower or whatever they have also in the basement, it has to go to the sanitary sewer. So what happens is whenever the stormwater comes, that water backs up into the storm drain and out into the basement. And it can put, quite a bit of water in the basement, depending on what kind of, what you're doing and where you're at. And if you don't have a reverse flow mechanism on that pipe, then your basement is going to flood. And so that's one thing homeowners should really make sure they investigate. We do have a program for as well for backflow prevention devices for sanitary as well as stormwater for those houses that unfortunately have that situation. But that's no longer allowed. All that water has to go to the sanitary sewer now.
So John brings up an interesting issue that I hadn't noticed before, and that is on redevelopment of properties is the quality of the soil that's being put back in, and that he's visibly seeing that soil with gravel and other impermeable things are being put on the property, and it's just being topped with 1 or 2 inches of 2 to 4 inches of topsoil. Is there anything that we can do? Do we have a requirement that the soil fill be of a certain quality that can absorb rainwater?
Yeah, that would only apply. I mean, that only applies to BMP specifications and things like that. If a developer or whomever wants to leave behind crappy, soils, as long as they're not totally impervious or impervious at all, which, the inclusion of stone or something like that in that dirt wouldn't necessarily impact its impervious, or non-imperviousness or perviousness, I should say. So there's not a lot that we could do about that. Again, that's where the quality of the developer and homeowner comes into play. The quality of the developer, and if we are talking new homes and new homes only, then again, buyer beware on when you're dealing with these some of these homes. So it's just good to do all your research, really.
We'll have folks raise their hand if they feel like their question hasn't been surfaced so far. It looks like we've gotten most of them. So if somebody does see where sump pumps are being piped directly to the sanitary sewer, should they notify the city?
Yes, they can, and they can notify me or any member of the city staff for that matter.
One thing I'd like to add to that about redevelopment is something I've learned from my, I guess, fellow, fellow drainage fans that I've met in the city in the last couple of years, is just when you're walking around the city and you see a site that's under development, I've started to pay close attention to the erosion, the soil control, the silt fence that goes up around the around a construction site, having adequate gravel at the construction entrance, because I've seen in my neighborhood there were a couple of projects that have repeatedly dumped a lot of muddy runoff right into our creeks and right into our storm systems, and for every inch of silt from somebody's inadequate silt fence, that that's just it's like a clogged artery. You're going to have a heart attack of less capacity for stormwater to be in pipes, and that's just silt fence is not that expensive, and developers need to do a better job of making sure that when they're doing construction work during the summer, when we have these large storms, that what they have out there is actually doing an adequate job. And when you see mud on the street, that's a problem. When you see muddy runoff going into inlets, that's a problem. If you see mud going into changing the color of streams, that's a problem. So get in touch with Public Works and or the building department when you see that, because you might not be able to get it fixed immediately, but you could probably get it fixed in a few days before the next big storm.
Yeah, I second that. We do pay close attention to that kind of stuff, and if we get any reports, we're required by law to go out and look at them, and then make any changes necessary in order to do it, or we can stop some of the work that they do on the property itself. So for sure, please, if you see anything like that, please call Department of Public Works, and we'll get right after it.
Okay, I think we've exhausted the questions, so perhaps Mary, the closing comments by each of the panelists.
Okay, we can do that. I would also like to have you comment as you complete your comments here on a little bit more on the mixed-use development projects, and whether the city is placing more emphasis on more pervious surfaces and green space in those development projects, to the extent that that fits in with the comments you'd like to make as you close. Shall we start with Dave? Do you want to pick up first?
Sure, I'm happy to. So with respect to the large mixed-use developments, I know a lot of what we've heard is that a lot of them will supposedly improve the stormwater management of the areas they cover, that newer building practices and requirements will require more retention and detention on site. Some of the best management practices that Tony has mentioned. One of the challenges with that is, unlike some of the exurban and suburban, more suburban areas that are not 300 years old like we are, or more, is they have room to put in ponds near parking lots, and we don't have quite as much room to work with. So there are some other practices that have to happen in urban areas. So I'll let Tony and the other experts speak to that. A lot of so there are a lot of overlapping issues here in terms of our desire to make our city more livable, affordable, equitable place to live. It's a great place to live, but it's hard that with all the economic pressures that we're facing for more development, both commercial and residential. As Jeff pointed out earlier, like we already have quite a bit of impervious surface. And so we have there's a problem now. Like we need to, every major storm is a reminder that we need to do more to maintain our water systems and actually make up for some of the some of these things that have happened in the past to make sure that we're in a better place going forward in terms of keeping water away from water and sanitary sewer away from residences and businesses as much as possible, but also making sure that we're not that we're not just shoving it downstream as fast as possible, because we wouldn't want people to do that to us upstream as well. A lot of what I do is just kind of talk with other residents about kind of practical issues about how to maintain their homes, especially if you live in a resource protection area, an RPA. I know when I moved into an RPA, I didn't get a lot of guidance on what that meant for me, but I've come to know a lot of our public servants quite well in terms of anytime I want to do something on my house, and I've come to understand the importance of being extra careful in an RPA and kind of making up for some of the sins past and trying to be a better steward of the land and the water. I would encourage anyone who has any questions about just kind of practical stormwater or sanitary sewer issues to reach out to me. It's littlecitywaterproofers@gmail.com. Also, not everybody knows all the things that the city can do. The city offers sandbag loans to residents. You can get them short-term and long-term. You can get them filled or unfilled. So reach out to DPW with that. If you ever notice a fallen tree over a waterway, either in Falls Church or in Arlington, I often walk 4 Mile Run, and I've emailed the Arlington folks when I see some trees that are creating a dam downstream, because that's just going to back up and create a problem for us. And then let's see, if there's an impassable street or any sort of emergency, you can also just contact contact dispatch either at 911 or 248-5050. But yeah, there's a lot of the city has some good resources both on the city and through VPIS and through other programs. And we've learned a lot from what Arlington and Fairfax have offered, and there's a lot that we're learning. But this is going to be a process. There are no quick fixes here, and I will just say again a thank you to our city leaders. Stormwater and sanitary projects are not sexy. They do not make great photo ops most of the time, but they're incredibly important, and we're grateful for everything that the city council and the city staff have done, and VPIS as well in recent years to improve the shared understanding of the challenges we face and figuring out some better ways forward. So thank you all for doing this.
Thank you, Dave. And Tony, do you want to have any closing comments, and then we'll give Jeff the last word?
Sure. Again, thank you for inviting me out. I hope I was able to answer the questions appropriately. And again, feel free to, you guys have my contact information. Please feel free to drop me an email, adudley@fallschurchva.gov, adudley@fallschurchva.gov, and I'd be happy to talk to you. If you have an issue or problem, then I'll be happy to come out and take a look at it with you. So yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. As far as the infill development, I mean the multi-use development, just real short, with the way the city is now, it can only be an improvement as long as we put into place the right guidelines to develop those kinds of things. in the past, the mixed developments that I've seen have been very stormwater friendly, and have really taken it upon themselves to do a good job at that. And the fact that the state of Virginia would require, and Falls Church would require a lot for those types of developments, I think you'd see nothing but improvement from that kind of thing. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Jeff, if you want to make a few comments to wrap up.
Well, thanks very much. I'll be brief. Thank you to the panelists. I learned a lot tonight. I appreciate all their expertise. I will put in one last plug for the Rain Smart program. If you're interested in a rain barrel or in a rain garden, please take a look at the VPIS website. There's an application there for grants for both of those types of projects, and they'd love to work with you on helping stormwater soak into the ground where it falls. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. We appreciate your participation.